Nice job though. There, continue. So I've done, I'm sorry, all the credit here goes to Hildegard Snellgrove, who put these PowerPoint presentations together. But we've been going through just where we're at in terms of the reopening. So we've got a slide deck here that kind of takes us through where we're at in terms of COVID, where the economy is at, and then try to break down the sectors by accommodation, the airline, food service, restaurant sector, retail, attractions, travel, etc. And then I know I called this winners and losers, but I don't think there's any winners here. So we should come up with a better name here. But those that are faring better than others, I guess, amid the crisis. And then some overall, where are we still standing with consumer confidence, I guess. So if we look first at, you know, the situation worldwide. Worldwide, we have 26 million cases of this COVID-19 happening, or have happened, I guess. Everybody knows that the US is #1 in participation in this at about 6.1 million. And Canada right now is sitting at about just shy of 132,000 cases. And nearing in on, well, we have 9,180 deaths as of beginning of September. This graph gives you kind of the incidence level per 100,000 population. So there we go. So we can see that Quebec has the highest incidence per 100,000 population. And then that's followed by quite a bit down, but by Alberta and Ontario kind of neck and neck there. But you can also see on the right-hand side that BC, Alberta, and Manitoba are all starting to see spikes over the last few weeks. So this is a moving target, and we haven't, you know, broached the back to school yet. So it'll be interesting to see where we land in September as we move forward. So first, let's take a look at the economy. This looks back at the GDP by quarter back to 2006. You can see where we've had the great financial crisis there in 08 and 09. But up until this point, Q1 of this year, we really started this pandemic in March. So Q1 was down 8.2%, but Q2, we bottomed out 39% down in GDP. So we haven't seen that kind of economic downturn, and certainly not in my history anyway. But Stats Canada is calling for about a 3% increase in July. So presumably that means we'll have recouped about 2/3 of that lost output from, you know, the beginning and the height of this pandemic. So that's where we stand from an economic point. As everybody knows, we at CBRE Hotels track the accommodation sector fairly, well, we track it in depth, I guess. So this gives you probably 20+ years, I guess, of accommodation demand. And demand is measured by basically occupied room nights. So you can see over those 20+ years where we've had crises before, 9/11 and the SARS and the great financial crisis, where we've dipped in demand. But following those crises, it's usually taken us about somewhere between 12 to 18 months post that event before we started to recover. But this year with COVID, this has been unlike any other event, major crisis we've ever experienced in the sector. And we're forecasting at CBRE that demand this year will be down by at least 40%. That's going to mean a year-end occupancy, give or take around 38.5%. So we don't expect to see, you know, historically 12 to 18 months to recovery. This one is going to take us at least 3 years, 2023, before we're back to pre-COVID levels. This slide looks at kind of at the weekly performance of the accommodation sector since the onset of the pandemic, and it tracks it right up until the end of August. So the source here is the STAR weekly reports. And of course, you can see the solid lines here denote what's happening now. The dotted lines denote what happened at the same period last year. So you can see the gap in demand there. So the industry really bottomed out, I guess, way back in late March, and hovered around sub kind of 10% occupancy levels throughout April. And then around the middle of June, the provinces began to initiate the phased reopenings. And then we did get a good summer weather-wise. So there was a willingness for consumers to, get out and get away. So that's kind of, we're trending back upwards. But we actually just took a look this morning at our results from our database. We're tracking over 2,100 properties across the country. And of those properties, 70 to 75% of those properties are reporting occupancies in July, which is, of course, a peak month, at or below 50%. And that's really the cause for concern, because that's kind of near the threshold at which most hotels kind of break even after paying for their operating expenses and covering their debt. So when we get to those levels and we're in peak season, it's only going to get more challenging from here on out as we move into the fall and the winter months. So first question up for the audience participation here is, if we look across the country, which province do you think is leading in terms of the occupancy recovery? So click away. I guess, Rebecca, you can tell when everybody's in.
Yeah, we're at 11.
That probably sounds about what we have on the call, right?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so your answer is BC, I guess Ontario are the two leading ones. Okay, well, this was actually a surprise to me too, but the actual, there we go. The one that's the leading is actually Prince Edward Island. So their bubble is working. They're getting, this was for the most recent week ending August 29th. Only two provinces got over 50% occupancy. That was PEI and BC. So those that answered BC are up there. Ontario came in at third. They reported 43% occupancy for that week. And then the lowest occupancies are happening in Quebec. They're hovering around 32% at a provincial level. And Montreal is the most challenged city, particularly downtown, but overall Montreal is doing 22% for that week in August. So there's the variances across. If we look at it by property type, urban hotels and hotels, in and around the airport, they're the ones that are suffering the most. They've got occupancies hovering around 33%. And not surprisingly, resorts are faring the best. So the most recent week here, we're sitting at about 61% occupancy, but that compares to last year, we would have been doing about 83%. And limited service hotels are actually doing slightly better than full service hotels. We wanted to look at Ontario just to see who's leading here. Again, this is for the most recent week of the last week in August. And actually major cities, these are cities in Northern Ontario, are the bright spots here. Thunder Bay came in, that's the orange line, came in at 66%. And Sudbury, which is dark green on the chart here, it came in at 64%. And then you see some pickup in Niagara Falls. They got 49% for the month of August. And on Saturday nights there, they're kind of reaching at about 76%. That's the red. Ottawa is also doing fairly well, well as can be expected, I guess. They got 41% in August, and they're getting 50 to 55% on weekends. But Toronto is really lagging. That's the light green bar. And they're coming in at 28%. So very challenged in those markets. This one, we just wanted to look at how are we doing compared to the US. So this is, again, the solid line being the performance year to date, and the dotted line being where we were last year. So since the outbreak, Canada's seen a similar trend line in occupancy compared to the US. And by mid-August, both of them are, kind of reaching the same level at about 40% occupancy in that range. Now, so that's kind of the accommodation sector. Then we looked at the airline sector. We actually had Rebecca and I flew for the first time last week. The lineups are, easy to get through, that's for sure. And it's kind of ironic how they make you stand 6 feet apart going onto the plane, and then when you're on the plane, you're shoulder to shoulder. So it's kind of, but they do take whatever precautions are necessary with the the mask and just handing out a few supplies. No food and beverage service, none of that. So the sector here, this looks at basically blue is your Toronto airport, and here green is Vancouver, and I think pink is Montreal. And this shows you, where we were last year in the dotted experience, and then how we just went boom right down to nothing, particularly in the April and May period. And then we've seen a slight lift off, but only slight up until, we've only got numbers up till June in this case. But the transportation services sector is down by well over 81% compared to last year, and expenditures outside the country, international expenditures and so on, are kind of non-existent. They've fallen off by at least 90%. So Air Canada is basically now flying just to a select number of domestic locations, a little bit of transborder and international, but not that much. And the same with WestJet, largely offering destinations within Canada, very limited service within US, and one flight to the Caribbean, one flight to Mexico, etc. over the summer period. So that's the airline sector. The food service. This slide kind of shows you the percentage of the restaurants in Canada that have reopened as we kind of transition through those various recovery phases. So you can see now we're at about 80% of our restaurants that have reopened. And then this slide shows the trend line in who's eating out, or how many people are eating out at restaurants. So starting from back in February, we saw the big drop off from March to May, when most of those restaurants are closed. And then we've seen a gradual recovery with people getting a little bit more comfortable with eating out, but we're still 30 to 40% below where we were last year, and people are spending less. And restaurants, just like in urban hotels and so on, those restaurants that are in downtown cores that rely heavily on the office demand and so on, and tourist demand and so on, they've been really particularly hard hit. Travel, retail, attractions, and entertainment. This is kind of an interesting, interesting in that you're being phone with the location on it gets to be tracked in terms of your mobility. So this is coming from Google Mobility, and the data shows how visits to places such as like grocery stores and parks and so on have changed compared to the baseline. So the baseline here is that zero line, or zero across here. And you can see that well, our visits to the parks are way up. We've got some retail and recreation that's almost back to the baseline, but not quite. And then interestingly, the workplace, that seems to be fluctuating week by week, with maybe people going in for a day and then coming back home and working from home and so on. The attraction sector, particularly the indoor attractions, they have been really hard hit. This is just one example. The Vancouver Aquarium, they were closed for 3 months at the start of the pandemic, and then they reopened in June, and they operated kind of in safe COVID safe environment. They restricted the number of people going in and all that kind of stuff, but it was not able to, they're not able to cover their operating cost. So those costs are in excess of about $1 million a month. And they were down 80% in their ticket sales. So they've just announced that they're going to be closing to the public as of September 7th. And so that's going to result in a whole loss of 200 plus jobs and so on. And then they're going to just keep on the specialized staff that are responsible for the animal care. So that's one, example of what's happening there. Retail sales. Retail sales were up about 24% in June. They're starting to return to pre-pandemic levels, but I'm guessing that most of those stats reflect a kind of a more higher incidence in terms of online retail sales particularly than they do in terms of mall sales, which are another sector that's being really hard hit. This is interesting. This is MasterCard. They released some statistics on kind of emerging trends in travel spending, including both in-person spending and online transactions. And this is tracking just travel and entertainment spending. So the data shows, looking at G20 countries, it's really Italy, Russia, and France that are leading in terms of the recovery of that travel and entertainment spending. And Canada is sitting at 8th out of 19 of those countries tracked. So who's the winners and the losers? We've just brainstormed here, and this is not meant to be any comprehensive list or anything, but the challenged or the really dire performers include the restaurants, and particularly theme parks, water parks that can't open, indoor attractions, as I said, the urban and airport hotels, not to mention the whole sector. Anything in large groups, meetings, events, performing arts, fairs, exhibitions, and then the whole transportation sector. People are using their car as a mode of transportation, but certainly not airlines, rail, rental cars, and so on. And then sporting events as well. So those that are doing, I guess, so-so performance, in star in terms of where everybody else is at, I guess. Expanded outdoor patios, parks, the golf, boating, outdoor attractions, campgrounds, really cottage rentals and resorts have really taken off in terms of everybody seeking, and you can ask whatever you wanted for if you wanted to rent out your cottage this year. And RV and trailer rentals, they've been exceeding, or not exceeding, but doing well, I guess. So just to wrap up here, just wanted to look at your own consumer sentiment and asked a couple questions around whether or not you feel safe flying right now, if you feel safe staying in a hotel, or are you actively searching online for any travel deals? So Rebecca will put up our survey here. Okay, do you feel safe? 18%. Hotel, oh, good for hotels, 64%, but nobody's actively going out and looking for online travel deals. Oh, interesting. So when we ask this question of other groups, I see it seems to be in line. This was some work I think that Destination Canada did. 18% of them feel safe flying right now. What was our number, Rebecca? I can't say. Was it 16%?
So it was 18 as well.
Oh, wow.
And then, yeah.
And
feeling
what
safe in a hotel was 64%.
Oh, okay. So we're more aligned to stay at a hotel than others. That 28% are of the industry of consumers are looking at that. And we were close on the travel deals, right? We seem to be follow that same pattern.
Yeah, 18%.
18. So 15% are actively searching for travel deals as well. So it seems to be that, you know, health and safety are you know, still the number one thing that's on top of people's consumers' minds. We can see, you know, we have to be able to give consumers that confidence before we can expect further, I guess, recovery. But the thing that I wanted to kind of close with is we're now at the end of August, beginning of September, and as the tourism like peak season winds down, we are seeing some recovery, but that domestic travel just, you know, just depending on that, isn't making up for the absence of visitors from other parts of Canada and the US and international source markets. And particularly some of those winters that we got in the summer months, as we transition into the colder weather, there's going to continue to be maybe even larger challenges facing the industry, because, you know, we won't have the outdoor patios and we won't have the outdoor activities that we can participate in the warm weather that we've enjoyed this summer. So that's going to further exacerbate, you know, the recovery period overall. So that's kind of the where I wanted to close, and, you know, just bring it back to anybody's comments in terms of what they're seeing themselves, and whether or not you see the recovery being, I guess, even more challenged for the balance of the year.
Fran, there were some comments in the chat window. Mark Vandercliff was asking, are Canadian Airlines doing away with change fees as American carriers have done, hoping that this helps with travel planning and scheduling? And we know they have for the most part, although I know with some you get a credit if you're not going to change right away. And the only challenge with that is if you book something closer to the date of your travel, then of course you're going to have to pay the difference because costs will be up. But yes, they've changed or tried to get away from that. And then Aileen was saying,
Canada, though, sorry, NAV Canada is just introducing some increases in fees too, though, and the decision's still really out as to whether or not who's going to absorb those costs. So sorry.
And sorry, just Aileen was saying, I understand the ski and winter sport equipment sales. People are expecting record sales this winter and fall. Yeah.
We've seen that with a bunch of things. I know my sister just bought a teardrop trailer, and kayaks and canoes and so on have really been, you know, a hot commodity this summer. So I expect it'll continue into the winter with cross-country skis or whatever it might be. Yeah.
And David is saying it's a mixed bag in the north, from those doing very well to some sectors still challenged, to what is a very promising 2021 pending border issues. And Mark's comment was, well, when can I come across the border? And vice versa. Not this summer. Not this summer for sure. And I know that's a big issue with people that own camps in the north, correct? Yeah. So.
Yeah, I suspect if the border doesn't open for 2021, there will be a lot of closures because people just won't be able to survive. Yeah.
Air Canada Vacations just introduced a COVID-specific insurance firm for certain sun destinations.
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of cottages didn't open for sure. But that's also an issue of the Great Lakes too. Not all lakes, but certainly with many of the Great Lakes. I know Huron in particular, the erosion is insane.
Mm-hmm. Somebody's asking about the messaging on the, what was that one? Travel messaging will move from staycations to visiting other provinces. That's once we're moving out of you know, peak season here, that will be a bit of a challenge unless it's a ski destination, I would guess. You know, Tremblant and Whistler, Banff, etc. might benefit there, but I'm not. I still think it'll be largely in province travel. That's just my opinion, but.
And somebody was asking, does anyone have an idea of how low the daily new cases have to be? And David, yeah, the WHO guideline to lock down or open up is 4 new daily infections per 100,000. I thought it was 1. It's 4.
1 if it's a school.
Right. Canada is just under 1. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the airline industry is really pushing also to put some standardization in place for testing pre-flights and all that kind of stuff to try to open up that sector. But they want to make sure, as Beth Potter was saying on a call the other day, they want to make sure that whatever place is put in place in Canada is what is being adopted internationally, so that our rules are different than other destinations and so on. So there's been major probably advocacy happening there on the airline side.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to spend a week with our Minister of Tourism, not last week, but the week before.
Yeah.
And so it was really quite interesting as we traveled the north and what we were seeing. But you know, technically we're in stage 3. But you know, we've had some issues around marketing because we're, you know, through public health, we're not really supposed to be encouraging people to travel across regions right now. So when she made the announcement for the northern marketing, it was originally just supposed to be for the Manitoba marketing, but because of what she saw, we were able to get the announcement on the whole enchilada. And so things are starting to move. And I gather, you know, from talking to her, what she wanted to do was to be able to say, I traveled the province these last 10 weeks. I followed all the protocols. I didn't get the virus, and it is safe to move around the province. So I think we're going to start to see that very like next week, and we'll start to see some more messaging even coming out from Destination Ontario about moving around the province. So we will.
Good, thanks.
Any word on is there any pickup on the whole tax credit to travel within? You know, I think she was very much for that from what I understood from before. My biggest takeaway from the week was not really for anyone to expect any form of a bailout, and nobody told me that point blank, but just you know, from the way conversations went, I think and this may not be you know, an appropriate thing to say, but I think from the government's perspective, it seems like there may be a little bit of thinking around that, just like the people who succumbed to the virus, like many of them had some form of underlying issue that weakened them, and they're thinking that, you know, the same
you know, in terms of the businesses. And again, like I think from the from the work you've done, Fran, we can see that like in the big cities, you know, the downtown hotels are really struggling. In the north, if you're along a major highway and drive in, your chances are you're probably doing pretty good. The Kenora Hospitality Alliance is reporting 85% occupancy right now.
Wow.
And,
Wow.
you know, the remote operators, you know, the angling, the remote, and communities that are off the main path are still having, you know, they're still struggling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Mark saying operators in Traverse City are at 100% capacity right now. Wow,
Wow.
crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, and they're having a really difficult time keeping staff.
Yeah, I guess.
And I know that the general manager, the owner, was making beds last week when I talked to him.
Wow.
Wow. Wow.
Well, I'm sorry to have to cut us short, but
Oh,
I know
yes,
people
sorry.
have busy days, and we don't want to take up all your time. So we really do appreciate your attention and your input. Since May, we're going to be pivoting or shifting or swiveling a little bit here at the Rhubarb Collective. So please stay tuned, and we hope you continue to visit the website and check out our LinkedIn feed, and stay with us. But thanks again to everyone, and thanks, Fran.
Yes. Thank you.